Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel, Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron and I'm back again with yet another exciting Battlytics review. This one is a fan favorite, at least it is over on Patreon. It is the Caesar. So this one got a brand new facelift in the upcoming Kickstarter. Great miniature. I actually have my hands on one early. Absolutely phenomenal. But will the stats back up the coolness of the new design? I don't know. Let's take a look at this guy. So it is a 70-ton inner sphere heavy mech. It was produced in 3049, so right in that clan invasion era, right before the clans hit. This thing was put into production. Did have a lot of the tech from the Helm memory core, as you will see. It features double heat sinks, an XL fusion engine, which I don't love, but it does have 10 tons of armor for 162 pips. That's about 75% coverage, which is, I would say, par for the course. If you look at the armor distribution, though, a little concerning. It is light on the side torsos where that engine lives. Arms look great. Legs are pretty well armored. And then in terms of the payload, so what we've got is a medium pulse laser in the left arm, a medium pulse laser in the right arm, two rear-mounted medium pulse lasers. It's a total of 4 pulse lasers there. But the mainstay of the armament is an erPPC in the right arm, and then a Gauss rifle in the right torso. So this thing definitely packs a punch between those two guns. We'll have to see what it does by the numbers. I mean, my big concern here going into the gate is survivability, but we'll see. Stay tuned. Battlytics analysis coming right up. All right, so let's get started with these offensive benchmarks. So the first thing I notice here is that this mech is really incapable of building up any kind of heat, unless you're potentially firing everything, including the rear-mounted medium pulse lasers. You're just not going to generate heat. That Gauss rifle only building up 1 point offsets the erPPC, and again, this thing has what did I say? 32 points it can dissipate per turn, 32 points of heat per turn. So, numbers 219.8 points of damage over 12 turns. It's not terrible. There have been obviously stronger mechs, but there are also mechs that are a lot worse. This is actually significantly better than the 3025 era assault mechs in general. So, looking pretty good in that. Damage per hit is 11. Again, that's courtesy of those big cannons that it is packing. It doesn't really generate a ton of critical hits. Remember, it only has 4 forward-facing guns. Most of the deaths that you are getting in the lethality simulation, which again is pitted against a little javelin, just trying to see how fast it can kill it, just to benchmark this thing. Most of those kills are CT kills, but you can see 16.6% are in fact head kills, because it does have that decapitator in the form of the Gauss rifle, and of course the erPPC able to do a pretty good chunk to a fully armored head or knock the javelins clean off. Time to kill 7.5, so that's well below the average. The average is around 10, so it's doing well there. So definitely a mech that can kill. But again, let's get into the defensive side because I am a little bit concerned about the survivability. All right, so here it is. Let's start with the armor diagnostic first. So the yellow bars in this diagram represent where the average armor distribution should be based on the coverage. So the mech is 75% armor coverage, 74.7% to be exact. So it basically scales the maximum for each location, and that's where it draws the yellow line. So you can see the side torsos aren't just under armored, they're actually below spec for this armor. Same thing with the rear. I don't really mind the rear being low, especially considering it's got twin medium pulse lasers covering the backside, but that side torso, that's a little bit disturbing. On the mobility side, it's doing okay. 3.5% of the time, it is seeing a motive hit in the leg. You can see in the 12-turn simulation, on average, the target mod is dropping, meaning it is definitely taking an actuator hit or something along those lines in the course of the game. So you should expect this thing to slow down a little bit throughout the match. The average target mod sustained through all 10,000 simulations was 1.78. Not too shabby, but you're really not relying on the TMM or the target mod of this thing to keep you alive, right? And that, in conjunction with weaker armor on the side torsos, leads to a pretty abysmal survivability of only 39.2%. Engine deaths, 52.1% of the time, this thing is dying because of an engine hit. So that is, or an engine kill, I should say. And that includes just total deletion of a side torso, which, as we know, on an inner sphere mech, generates 3 engine criticals automatically, thus taking the mech out of commission. No ammo kills. The Gauss rifle is cased, so it's pretty well protected there. But the and then the Gauss ammo itself is in fact inert, so nothing to worry about from an ammo perspective. But if you do take a Gauss rifle hit and you've already sustained internal damage, that Gauss rifle is going to take out the engine as well, cased or not. So it's sort of a tough thing. By the simulation, that does count as an engine kill, not an ammo kill. But just wanted to point out that dynamic does in fact exist. All right, why don't we take a look at the efficiency? I do want to point out that this thing, and I don't think I said this in the intro, the battle value is 1578. That's really not bad for an inner sphere 70-ton mech packing a Gauss rifle. Maybe that'll be its saving grace. Let's take a look at the efficiency and see. All right, so here it is by the numbers. Survival rate 39.2%, which we just talked about. Look at the damage loss. So this purple and blue graph up at the top, if you're not familiar, it's worth explaining. So the blue curve, the blue area there, represents the optimized damage. Now, in this case, there's no optimizing the damage because it can't build up any heat. It's doing 219 points of damage over the 12 turns. The purple area represents the effective ACD. So it takes a look at the survivability turn over turn, and it says, can I actually do damage on this turn? What percent of the time am I alive to deal damage on this turn? And then it calculates the effective ACD, which drops 27% down to 160.4, and sort of puts it on par with that 3025 era design. Now, the average damage loss is about 10%, is what we see. Like, we think that that's reasonable from a statistics perspective here, from all the mechs that we've looked at over time. 27 is definitely on the high side. Despite all of that, this still clocked in at a 7.26 on the efficiency rating scale there, which is very, very respectable. That's not a mech to ignore. It's not not trash. I mean, the average is a little bit over 5 if you look at that bell curve, and you can see there's a significant number of mechs in that 3 to 4 to 5 range. So this is far exceeding those. And it's not a 9 or a 10 like some of those ultra powerful clan mechs, but it's a solid performer. Definitely one you should watch out for on the field, and one that you don't want to ignore entirely in terms of putting in your force either. Gunnery sensitivity on this thing. So let's focus on the central part of this diagram here. This analysis is really about, am I going to get bang for my buck if I dial up the gunnery on the pilot? So what we see here is it's a fairly flat curve. The gunnery sensitivity isn't gigantic. It's actually a little probably lower than I would think, or I would have expected. You definitely get most bang for your buck out of gunnery 2. It's starting to flatten off beyond that. You still get a decent return at gunnery 3, and even at gunnery 4, you're basically above average, or about average on that efficiency curve. So at the end of the day, for this mech, from an efficiency perspective, it's actually, the rating's much higher than I thought. The survivability is really, really bad. But I think that points out a little bit on how to play this mech, how to protect this mech, and how to deal with it if you see it on the other side of the table. But let's talk about all of that next in our role analysis. Okay, so here it is, role analysis. I only picked 2 roles for this mech. Primary, first and foremost, let's call this one a second line mech. This is not a mech you want to stick in the front line and charge in. Even if it's a big mech and it's the biggest mech on the field and it's like a bunch of mediums, I still would keep this thing relatively protected because it is a bit of, a glass cannon, if you will. The second role I selected for this was a defender, where it can just kind of hang back and use its range, the erPPC, the Gauss rifle, to deliver a bunch of damage and hopefully not take a ton of return fire. And then again, back to the second line role, if you're unfamiliar with what that means, generally the play style there is, use it as a fire support mech. And then once the enemy force is weakened enough, or if you need sort of a second wave of reinforcements to cover a position or to push through or to finish off an enemy assault or whatever it might be, you can use this mech and close it in. Hopefully there are more juicy targets in your force for the opponent to be looking at, things that are closer to death, so on and so forth. The moral of the story is you have to keep this mech protected to bring that Gauss rifle and that erPPC into play as much as possible. Otherwise, you will see, I think, early loss of this mech. If you can keep it on the battlefield longer, you will see an more efficient return on the point investment. If you rush it in haphazardly, obviously, it does have that risk of getting nuked pretty quickly. From the damage perspective, it's fairly flat. So you can see here on the bar chart, bottom left, the alpha strike capability, the peak alpha strike. We're talking forward facing, 37 points of damage, and that's at 6 inches. And then on the, what else is interesting here is the zero heat ACD, which means like, what are you likely to do in terms of damage? And you can see that peaks around 2 inches. Remember that Gauss rifle has a bit of a minimum range. So you just want to stay out of that. Thankfully, the erPPC does not. But you're still doing, on average, 30.8 points of damage per turn. That's at 2 inches. That's pretty good. And then you're going to do, a maximum of 25 outside of that medium pulse laser range. So not too bad there. Now, the other thing I want to call out here is the ACD cap, right? That is basically the differential or the difference between what you can do maximally and what you're likely to do based on the dice. And 83% is pretty good. So the way I would summarize the Caesar, it's a reliable damage dealer, but it is very fragile and you need to keep it safe. This is sort of enlightening to me, to be quite honest, although I'll admit that I've only used the Caesar in Alpha Strike, I think. I don't know that I've used it in a significant period of time in Classic, but, in Alpha Strike, it is a little bit different. But, I having seen this analysis, it will definitely change my perception of how to use the Caesar. Interested to know if you feel the same way, if you've had success using this Caesar as like a brawler type mech, again, because it does have those rear medium pulse, and it sort of leads you to believe it's tough and close. But again, the under-armored side torsos, the XL engines, the risk of the Gauss exploding, case or not, there's some tremendous risk there to losing this mech to an unlucky shot or two. So, again, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. And who's seen that crazy new Caesar in the recognition guide? It's got like ferro something, fellow armor maybe, or hardened armor. I don't even know. It moves like a turd, but it's got crap tons of armor. It's kind of funny. But subscribe, give us a like, and if you want to help out the channel more, head on over to Patreon. Patreon keeps the lights on, keeps the cameras rolling, so thank you to all of our patrons out there. We really appreciate everything that you're doing. And of course, 2 shout-outs to 2 of our friends here, Aries Games and Minis. That is your one-stop shop for all things BattleTech, the dice, the books, the miniatures, whatever you might need. The Catalyst Force packs are there, everything, all kinds of great stuff. And including, some terrain as well that you can pick up. But if you really want terrain, head on over to Terrainify.com. Terrainify has got absolutely amazing products. You've seen them in our battle reports, and they're coming out with new stuff, innovating all the time. So definitely check out our friends over at Terrainify. But that said, I'm all done. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this analysis on the Caesar. Would love to hear what you think about it. Like I said, definitely has changed my perspective on how I would play it. Still one of my favorites, still would use it, but definitely have to be a little more careful. Can't be reckless with this thing. It's sort of like a slightly bigger rifleman, I guess, in terms of like it can deal a ton of damage, but it's a bit fragile. Although I guess it doesn't overheat like a rifleman, which is a great thing too. But anyway, I'm all done. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Of course, stay tuned. Always great stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming.